Welcome to the deep dive. This deep dive is adapted from a clinician-written article on Mentalyc, and we're bringing it to life in audio for therapists who, prefer listening on the go.
Yeah, and today we're focusing on confidentiality.
The single most crucial element of our practice.
And we are really glad to feature the perspective of Sylvie Saxena, that's S-I-L-V-I, Saxena, S-A-X-E-N-A. She's an MBA, LSW, a licensed social worker, and a certified trauma professional.
Her article just gets right to the practical, ethical difficulty of this.
It really does. It cuts right through the jargon.
And if you're new to this context, Mentalyc is a clinical intelligence platform. It's designed to support therapists specifically with documentation to make that whole process more manageable.
But today, we're diving into that core principle.
Right. Confidentiality. It's the cornerstone of trust. But as we know, it involves these incredibly complex legal, ethical, and frankly, logistical dimensions that just demand constant diligence.
That's absolutely non-negotiable. And in Sylvie's article, it establishes right away that confidentiality is both a legal obligation
Backed by state and federal law.
and a deep ethical commitment. It's the absolute bedrock of the counseling relationship. I mean, think about it. Without that ironclad assurance, would a client ever feel safe enough to open up?
No way. Not about their deepest fears or traumas.
Of course not.
And that's why it's more than a rule, isn't it? It's a therapeutic tool. That trust allows for the emotional honesty you need for any real intervention to work.
Right. It actually shifts the power dynamic. It protects the client's vulnerability, so it can't be exposed or weaponized outside that
Any
role.
therapeutic container.
Exactly. And that brings us to the dual nature of this protection. You've got the ethical guidelines from bodies like the ACA.
Or the BACP for our international colleagues.
Sure. And then you have the legal statutes like HIPAA in the U.S. These two forces, they kind of work in tandem. They require us to protect information unless a very specific exception applies.
Which usually centers on risk of harm or a court order.
Right.
So let's pivot to where the rubber meets the road, because modern practice is anything but simple.
Oh, not at all.
We're moving between, in-person notes, secure digital records, maybe consultations. So how does a busy, maybe even burned out practitioner actively maintain this commitment?
Yeah, especially when your practice is so decentralized.
It feels like it requires military-grade consistency, often on a shoestring budget.
It does. And we have to stop thinking of it as this passive ideal and start treating it as an active procedural commitment. The article outlines a few major areas for that.
Okay, let's unpack those. First up, informed consent. We've all done it. You hand over that thick packet on day one. But what makes it an active process?
Well, the active part is that it's not static. It can't be. First, it has to be crystal clear about the client's rights and the limits of confidentiality.
Okay.
But then you have to communicate it verbally, make sure they get it, and document that you had that conversation. And you have to revisit it.
So if a client's situation changes, say they move from individual to family therapy.
Exactly. Or if they start talking about higher risk behavior,
Yeah.
you should be documenting that you reviewed those limits.
Yeah.
Just making sure they remember the boundaries.
That makes perfect sense. It's about anticipating a future rupture and having the foundation already in place.
Precisely.
Okay, second area, secure storage. This seems easy, right? Just use a password. But what are the big risks we overlook?
The risk is almost always convenience. We rely on cloud services, personal emails, maybe an unsecured home office setup.
Guilty.
We all are. But the source really emphasizes that records have to be in a HIPAA-compliant EHR, an electronic health record, with multi-factor authentication and strong encryption.
So just having a password on your laptop isn't enough.
It's totally insufficient. You need an audit trail, encryption for data that's moving, and encryption for data that's just sitting there.
And what about old school paper files? Do people still need to worry about those?
Absolutely. The myth is that just shredding is enough, or, sticking a file in a desk drawer. No, any physical document has to be in a locked cabinet in a locked office. We have to treat those files like the sensitive records they are.
It's a tangible way to show you care for that trust.
Exactly. Okay, third area, de-identification. This is for when we seek consultation or supervision, which is vital. But how do we do that without making the client recognizable?
It's a tightrope walk.
A constant one. Yet be rigorous about omitting names, birth dates, any unique identifier. Like you wouldn't say the client who lives next door to the mayor.
Right, or the person working on that really specific research project.
Exactly. The focus has to be on the clinical dynamics, not biography. And if a supervisor really needs specifics, That might identify the client.
You need written consent first?
Explicit written consent, detailing exactly what will be shared and with whom. Without that, it has to be completely anonymous.
That distinction is so key. Consultation is necessary, but never at the cost of the client's privacy. Okay, now for the tough part. The fact that confidentiality is not absolute. These boundaries cause so much distress for us as practitioners.
They really do. There are about 4 major boundaries we have to communicate during informed consent. First and foremost, an immediate, credible threat of serious harm.
To themselves or someone else.
Right. Suicidal intent or a threat to an identifiable third party. Second, suspected abuse of a minor or a vulnerable adult. That's a mandated report.
And third, legal proceedings. A subpoena signed by a judge can compel disclosure, though we always try to assert privilege first.
Always. And the fourth boundary, it often comes from the client themselves.
When they grant consent to share information with a doctor or a school counselor.
Yes, that client-driven sharing for integrated care. Setting these expectations early helps preserve trust, even when you have to enforce one of the tougher boundaries.
Because that moment, say making a mandated report, that's a profound rupture in the alliance.
It is, and it has to be handled with extreme clinical sensitivity.
Which takes us beyond just following rules and into real clinical excellence. The article argues this commitment requires ongoing reflection. Why is that so important?
Because just dealing with security and boundaries pulls focus from the core alliance. If you have to spend 2 minutes verifying your platform's security, that little transaction affects the client's sense of safety.
That is such a good point.
So continuous reflection means you're constantly tracking how well that connection is holding up under all these necessary but sometimes restrictive dynamics.
It's the difference between being a compliant clinician who follows the law and a reflective one who understands the impact of the law on the healing process.
Yes, that's it exactly.
Yeah.
This continuous tracking helps prevent those subtle blind spots we all have in the moment. We might be so focused on the high-risk disclosure that we miss the nonverbal cue that says their safety just eroded.
And this is where modern tools can be so helpful. The article mentions Alliance Genie is designed specifically for this, to deepen the alliance through insight and reflection.
It is. Alliance Genie helps by tracking those alliance signals, the moment-to-moment cues about engagement, and it auto-captures areas for growth. It helps you reflect on how a difficult topic might have impacted the client's perceived safety.
So even when you have to enforce a boundary, the underlying trust has a better chance of remaining intact.
Because you've been tracking and understanding the alliance all along.
Just taking a quick pause here. If this critical work, the reflection, tracking alliance patterns, maintaining secure documentation, if that feels like this immense administrative burden on top of your clinical work.
Which it so often does.
It does. It's worth knowing that Mentalyc can help streamline that process. Its AI note taker supports your detailed documentation and clinical judgment while staying fully HIPAA and SOC2 compliant. You can explore it at Mentalyc.com.
So let's talk about 2 of the most complex settings where this gets even muddier. First, group and family therapy.
Oh, that's a big one.
Huge. Because the therapist is bound by confidentiality, but the other group members are not legally obligated to maintain privacy.
That changes the entire definition of the therapeutic container. You can't guarantee legal protection.
You can't. You can only encourage an ethical agreement. So it becomes absolutely essential for the therapist to set clear boundaries in that first session. You have to emphasize discretion and respect while being transparent that you can't enforce it legally.
Your role shifts to being a facilitator of a culture of trust.
Perfectly said. And if a breach happens in the group, you have to address it immediately, focusing on repairing the rupture within the group dynamic itself.
And speaking of shifting containers, let's talk teletherapy. The obligation is the same, but the medium introduces so many new risks.
So many. The non-negotiables are using encryption and secure, HIPAA-compliant platforms, but then you have the environmental factors.
Like being in a private space.
Right, for both the therapist and the client. And that's often really hard for clients in crowded homes. And then there's the risk of recordings.
That's a huge vulnerability. The client could be recording the session on another device and you'd have no idea.
Exactly. So clear communication about prohibiting recording has to be in your intake. You also have to educate the client about the risks of storing sensitive data on their own devices.
It sounds like the biggest challenge is just anticipating all the ways data can leak outside the secure platform.
It is. It requires constant tech review and transparency. The client has to understand how their data is moving, and that responsibility falls on us, the clinicians.
Which brings us to the stress test for all of this. when a breach actually happens. Whether it's an unintentional slip, like leaving a file open.
Or discussing a case too loudly in a hallway.
Right. We have to underscore the severity of the consequences.
They're devastating. For the client, it's deep emotional distress, re-traumatization, loss of faith in therapy, that the trust is almost impossible to get back.
And for the practitioner, it can be career-ending, can it?
It can be. State board sanctions, loss of licensure, legal action, damage to your reputation. The article underscores that if a breach happens, you need a clear response plan.
Which includes what?
Timely, honest disclosure to the client. Immediate consultation with supervisors or legal counsel. And prioritizing the client's well-being over covering up the mistake.
So if we pull all of this together, what's the one grounded takeaway clinicians can apply today?
I think it's this. Confidentiality is how we tangibly show respect for our client's dignity and safety. Don't let your procedures get static. Review your informed consent and your tech every quarter. That clear, early communication helps clients feel safer and more in control.
So they can engage more fully in the real work.
From session 1.
The legal and ethical parts are crucial, but the essence of it all, it's about creating the conditions for healing, growth, and real human connection.
That commitment is the unshakable foundation, and we have to make sure it's robust enough for modern high-tech practice.
And if you want support tracking those alliance patterns across sessions to gain that supervision-like support for your reflection, Alliance Genie can provide those nuanced insights all without ever storing any session recordings. Thank you for diving deep with us.
We'll catch you next time.